promote yourself because, like you said, nobody else can. Okay.
I think sometimes you don't want to be that guy who's always talking about themselves.
Yeah.
So not only do you have imposter syndrome and maybe there's some self-confidence going on, but then you're like, I don't want to be the guy that's like this used car salesman.
But you also have to be partly a narcissist at the same time to be able to promote yourself that way.
You have to figure, I think you really need to figure out how it works for you and your brand. So like part of mine is humor, so.
I laugh at myself all the time, Justin.
So that was my next question. Like, what are the keys to overcoming that? Is there a one-shot solution, or is it individualized?
I think it's time to some extent. Just keep doing it. I mean, for me, I've been doing panels at DragonCon for a number of years, and it wasn't until last year that I finally stopped being nervous. And I wondered if it was a fluke, like it was a pandemic, there wasn't as many people, and I'm not nervous this year yet. I'm sure it'll happen. Give it time.
Tyra, millions of people are watching it. Just...
Be quiet.
I mean, smile, you might be on DC TV right now.
I'm speaking with my eyes currently.
It's time to shake your fail tethers, right?
I mean, I think it is individualized, and it's got to be authentic. Like, that's the thing that I had to learn, is if I am authentic about the promotion, and because the greatest way, there was a panel yesterday that said this, the greatest way, especially if you're on, like, let's say Twitch, that's where I know most of my stuff, is participate in Twitch. Not just to go in and say, hey, I'm also a streamer, I'm a podcaster, blah, 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 but become part of the communities, and then they learn about you. And then they see that you also do this stuff. And that's the type of promotion I started doing was, you know, I was able to get a couple of opportunities to come here to DragonCon and I can talk about it, but I'm very authentic about when I do talk about myself, and I've been able to get myself somehow in a position over the last 17 years to be able to be in this position to where I don't have to be the used car salesman, but I also don't have 1,000 listeners. So, but to me, that's not failing. You also have to define what is failing to you.
I agree completely. You know, on our network, we have a variety of shows, and some of them only get 50 downloads a month. But, you know, there's 50 downloads, you know, and that's where you have to put yourself and decide, is this worth the effort you're putting into it each week or every couple of weeks to put out your podcast? Is it worth it? Because as we talked about in our class, for every podcast that succeeds, that makes it 100 episodes, 90% of them will not even make it past their 5th episode.
Yep.
And, you know, because people realize, hey, I've got to do promotions. I've got to get myself out there. I have to edit. I have to do all these different things. And that's where we're hopefully going to help you with it a little bit today. And, you know, we've all gone through that. You know, there's been days where it's been, got to edit the podcast again. Oh, I've got to do this. I've got to create an ad for TeePublic, or I've got to create an ad for Facebook or Twitter or whatever, and you just have to get stuff out there to be able to promote your stuff.
For me, I would, one of the biggest pieces of advice that I got from someone who I looked up to in the podcasting industry was to expect failure, but be consistent. I might have switched that around, be consistent, but expect failure. You only learn by failing. You only know what not to do the next time around by, oh, well, this didn't work, that didn't work. You just know not to do that again and go back to the drawing board, try something different. I can't tell you how many times I have failed in this podcasting, but I keep going. You know, my podcast is fairly new. I'm up to 26, 27 episodes, but I'm still doing it because people are out there, people are listening, people giving me feedback, telling me what to improve on and what not to improve on. Definitely listen to your audience once you start building up your audience, because that's going to help cater like how you edit your podcast. Are you going to be more of a casual podcaster or a factual podcaster? Those are the type of things you only learn by doing.
Exactly, and that's the one thing also, do not get discouraged if you do not hear from your listeners. Because most of the time, only time you're going to hear every once in a while, you'll get an attaboy, good job, something like that, or I liked what you wrote. But 90% of the time, if you hear from somebody, hey, do you know a section of your podcast is missing? Or hey, it came out garbled, or hey, I hate you, and you know, stuff like that. And I love getting hate mail. I love getting it because that shows that people are listening, and they're listening to hate you.
To steal a quote from a movie, so somebody says, "Oh, you're the worst podcaster I've ever heard of." And I'm like, "Oh, but at least you've heard of me."
Yes.
True. Well, and if you think about it, have you written your favorite podcaster to tell them how much you love their show? And if you haven't, maybe after today you should.
Like I said, I want to make this an open room discussion, so if you have anything to add in at any point, please go ahead and shoot your hand up and we'll bring you into the discussion. Because I want to hear from you guys as well, if you have anything to add.
I have one question.
Yeah.
Does everybody here have a website for either themselves or their podcast?
Yes.
Yeah.
In
So
the
please.
works.
Good.
Good, okay, good. Because that's the starting point. You've got to own that landscape.
Yes, especially in this era where social media, it fluctuates so much, right? We've seen the rise and fall of MySpace, we've seen the rise and we're in the middle of, I think, the decline of Facebook.
We hope.
Maybe. Instagram, Twitter, all those things, right? Social media platforms are so temporary, but your website, as we learned back in the days of RSS feeds, that is really your spot. It doesn't go anywhere unless it's a double-edged sword. It doesn't go anywhere unless you make it go somewhere, but it's not going to vanish unless you let it
The
die.
one thing I hate about Facebook, in all truth, is even in my own Facebook group that I have for my podcast, is 98% of the people in that group do not see the post about the podcast because of the algorithms and everything. And because, I might have 2,000 people in my Facebook group, but then you see seen by 35 people. It's like, what? That just doesn't make sense. And because Facebook wants you to buy their ads to do it, and do not waste the money. It is garbage.
Awesome. So I actually had a quick question that actually goes into what we were talking just a moment before. Specifically, when you actually get those, 1-star reviews where they're like, I hate this podcast and it's terrible and why would you ever listen to it? Don't listen to this podcast. Do you guys have sort of any kind of tried and true thing of, don't respond, that's the best way, or respond with something canned, that's the best way, or respond with something actually like, super logical about what they said or whatever in some way? Do you guys have a response for those types of reviews or comments or whatever in that sphere?
I'm gonna go ahead and take this first just because this recently has happened to me. I take the policy of kindness. If you tell me you hate my product, tell me why you hate it. What is it about it that you can change? So I'll go to that person, reply in the message. Hey, thank you for your feedback. I appreciate your candor. But what is it about it more specifically you didn't like? What is it that I can improve on? And what is it that I can do to make you a continual listener? Because like what was mentioned earlier, you're gonna hear from your haters more than you hear from your supporters.
Sure.
So treat those haters like they're royalty and treat them with kindness. As weird as that may be, I know it's kind of backwards, but at least you're getting some type of feedback. And I grew up on the policy of as long as people are talking about you, whether it's positive or negative, people are talking about you. So I look at it as a good thing. I never look at it as someone giving me negative feedback as a bad thing.
It's true. It's, if it's somebody who writes me about, like a technical issue, and gave me a 1-star, something was garbled or something, I'll write them back in the feedback, like I'll respond to them, saying, thank you for the information, I appreciate it, give us another shot, we'll fix what you brought up. But if somebody is just hateful or something, I will ignore in a heartbeat. And there's a lot of times, like the first time I got a 1-star review on iTunes, or Apple, whatever they're calling it today, was because in an episode, it was right after one of the school shootings. And I had a kid in school at the time, and it really affected me. And so in that episode, and I'm not trying to turn this all about me, but I said, hey, let's get some kind of gun control, let's get some kind of thing. somebody a week later said, "Oh, these guys think they're funny." You know, I found they were promoting themselves at a con, so I gave them a listen, and they were all getting all political and everything on. So these guys suck, you know, that type of thing. I took that with a grain of salt, and I was like, "Oh, you know, screw you," you know, that type of thing. And that's what you have to do. Don't respond. Don't sink to their level. Is what I'm trying to go for.
So did you really just say not to make this about me on a panel about promoting yourself? And making yourself
Yes, he
Failing,
did.
see?
There will be no shaking.
That is kind of shaking your tail though at the same time, right? I want to sound bad, but.
Let's talk about my other favorite subject.
I personally have never responded to them. I have a lot more former listeners than I do have current listeners, and I have, and what I do is not for everybody, and I realize that, and I've made peace with that. But what I have said is instead I will like tell my listeners, hey, if you like this, maybe leave a 5-star review on iTunes or Spotify or wherever you see this, to try to counteract that and let the people who do like your podcast and maybe are part of the 5% that will interact with you, make them or empower them to promote it or put a good review up on iTunes or wherever. And I always say at the end of my show, if you like the show, tell a friend. If you hate the show, tell an enemy. I don't care, just tell someone.
I'm going to take that for myself.
Absolutely.
I've stolen from here at Dragon Con. Gary Mitchell started it with talking about the panels and everything. Hey, if you like my podcast, leave us 5 stars. If you didn't like it, leave 5 sarcastic stars. Thank you.
Yes.
So I think there's a balance between it. I think what Mark said about leading with kindness and asking, so what can I do to improve, is what you do when they're being reasonable. And I think what Mike and them mentioned about when they're not being reasonable is when they're trolls, you don't respond. Never poke the troll. But I tell you the best thing to take care of that is your fans. Because they will slaughter them in a heartbeat. And
Yes.
you don't get it dirty, they're getting the blood, you're good. So
Let's go here.
So you mentioned don't pay for the Facebook algorithm, which I agree with, but what is worth paying for then? Which ones are worth it to put money into for paying?
That's a great question. It's truthfully, there's a lot of scammers out there.
Yes.
I mentor a lot of different podcasts and podcasters when they're starting up. And there's a podcaster I've been working with who is based out of Macon. And basically, he started his podcast and he saw one of those Facebook ads. Hey, you know, want to get 4,000 listeners, want to get 5 stars and be at the top of the thing. He paid $4,000 to this person. They disappeared so quickly after they took his money.
Yep.
And do not fall for that. The best way to do it is just word of mouth, is natural. There's keywords, there's ways to do it. Tyra is really good at promoting. And she's taught me a few things, and it's just like, it's pretty awesome to be able to get it's word of mouth, and try putting your podcast out to as many sources as possible. People hate it when the Dragon Con report comes out, because I post it to every single Facebook group that has the word Dragon Con attached to it, just because I want it out there. I post it to Instagram, Twitter, there's, and, Twitch, and, wherever you can, post it. And keywords are so important. Make sure you're doing the hashtags and everything with it, because that's how people find you.
I want to say, just know where your audience is, because that's where you need to be. So if your audience, like Facebook, we can badmouth it all we want, but if you're looking for a 35 to 60 crowd, they're there. And I'll tell you, even my college students are there in groups. Groups are a big thing regardless of age, and they can be really important, like Mike's doing promotion there. If you do that, do take a breath between each post, because Facebook will send you to jail for posting too fast on too many groups, because they think you're a bot.
And I've gotten thrown in jail many times.
See, you have to not be bot-like, but...
You need to learn that, Tyra.
I would say Facebook jail has helped me move on to other social media platforms to start marketing there. So thank you, Facebook jail. I do want to add one thing about your question. Like he said, instead of investing in the ads, I would say invest in yourself. Learn search engine optimization, the keyword searches and things like that. Learn business and marketing. That has been the biggest investment that I've made in my brand, is just re-educating myself on how to market things. Because I'm an artist, I went to art school. My brain works like artsy fartsy-ness. So I had to reset myself to think like a business. I started creating my own ads and just promoting those through Facebook and putting a little bit of money behind that. I started like you said earlier, going to where my audience is. I run a geek podcast channel, so I go to where all the geeks are who want to know all the geeky things, and I just go from there. Not only I post on Facebook and TikTok, I go on Reddit, I go on Discord. I'm about to start up Twitch just because a fan suggested that I start up Twitch for my podcast. There's always something you can do before you spend money on one thing.
This is huge right here, because that's about what I was about to say was, you got to kind of follow trends of where things are. And a lot of this, podcasting was described to me back in the 2000s as a labor of love. Like, you're not going to get rich off of this. It's what you put into it, and all of it's going to be from you. It's really a kind of expensive hobby. So like going to Dragon Con, for example, you get business cards, not sponsored by Mr. Trent. Ribbons are a big thing at Dragon Con, so go ahead and make some ribbons, just a short batch and see what happens that year. If they take off, you head into the next year with a bigger batch. Go see where your audience is hanging out, like, has been brought up before. I started experimenting with Twitch just to see what's out there and see how it flows and what it does. Not actually putting my own content on there, but watching other people and how they interact and what the landscape looks like. It's how I learned about raids. I'm like, what is a raid? And then you realize this one person that you're watching is now grabbing you and passing you like a football to one of their friends who's now active. And wow, I'm now following them. It worked because they are like the person I just came from. And I like what's going on here. You discover more people, and you want that to happen to yourself.
That's one of the things we do. And first, we made lanyards because for a long time, Dragon Con didn't give you a lanyard.
It's true.
And so we made a bunch of lanyards to give out. And then we were like, all right, we got our own lanyards. And Dragon Con's like, nope, now we got our own lanyards. Like, oh, so now the ribbon thing, we're going to come in next year, and they're going to be like, no, we give everybody 50 ribbons now. That's
the ribbon starter pack.
So I wanted to piggyback on two comments. I'm going to piggyback on the Twitch rating because we do this. So my podcast is we in front of a live Twitch audience, and we kind of changed it up a little bit. After we were done, we would raid someone else, and that works both ways because it introduces our audience to them. Time, and you shouldn't expect this every time, but sometimes if the person we raid knows who we are, will promote us to their audience, and then their audience will come and follow our channel and be there the next time. And a lot of times now they'll do shout outs, which even put like a 1-minute clip. If somebody clips on Twitch, and it will play on their channel, one of your podcasts or whatever. So that's been an effective promotional tool as well. If you really absolutely want to spend money, I'll tell you what so this is more for our network, but this could also work with a little bit of tweaking for like an individual podcast. We do not spend any money on ads on websites. We sponsor events. So my network, we're an Atlanta local. There is a pinball arcade convention in July called the Southern Fried Gaming Expo. We are a silver sponsor, which means we get our logo everywhere. We get an ad in the program, in the app. They put us in their newsletter. But that's where our people are. And then from that, they also allow us we're mentioned in front of panels. We get to moderate some panels, kind of like what we do here. But that's what we use our marketing budget for, is sponsoring that, or maybe sponsoring a smaller event, maybe like a podcaster meetup or whatever. That way they can buy food for people and stuff, and then sponsored by the Voice of Geeks Network. You can absolutely do that for your specific podcast as well, if you want to throw down that kind of money. Which is for smaller things, it's not that much. For things like Dragon Con, you're looking at a couple grand. But it's different than ads on a website or something like that, because everybody there is going to at least see your logo, even if they don't really look into it.
One of the best ways also, and it's completely free to get promotions out and people finding you, appear on other podcasts, guest.
Yes.
And, and because like on our show, anytime another person's paneling with us on our shows or anything, we make sure we give them time to promote their shows, and then we also promote their podcast or give links to their podcast in our show notes. So that way, it's a way for our listeners to be exposed to a whole new show, and we've actually, either, had people start their podcast that way. Oh, I'm starting a new podcast, and this is what it is. And I've had listeners start with them also and everything. Or I've gone on other shows, and I've gotten, a bump on my shows and everything because of me appearing on other podcasts that I had never even heard of. And so it's pretty amazing what you could do.
I do want to address the paid ads issue. So a lot of caveats. Let's say you've been doing your podcast, you have a good backlog of episodes, there's a lot of content that you have out there. Maybe you've kind of plateaued. You can really truly define what your target market is, because that's the key with being successful. And then, like Mark said, do it like $10 a week. Do it like low budget. But the longer you let that ad run on Facebook, the better that ad will perform. Because what Facebook does is it learns who to deliver that ad to that clicks on it. And over time, they get very, very good at it. The problem is most people don't let the time happen, or they tweak it too many times. So if you want to go that route, let's say you're like, I'm going to do $10 a week. Awesome. Make sure you've got a backlog, have a good website, have all of that. Then figure out tweak your ad, get it as good as you possibly can, and then let Facebook chew on it, and it will eventually get you where you're going. But it's got to have time.
So I have a question.
Yeah, I'm throwing that question out, and I'm following up with something she said.
All right.
So, you said define your target audience and how important that is. Can you explain a little bit more of like what that process is and how to even start thinking about? Because I started a podcast about 3 months ago. I was inspired by two completely different friends. They're like, yeah, we're doing podcasts. I'm like, that's cool. I'm going to do one. I found a buddy that was willing to do it with me, so I'm not just talking to myself. And then they're all gone. They stopped doing it, and it's just us now doing the podcast. And we've been doing it for like 3 or 4 months now. And I have no idea what the target audience. I feel like we're just making stuff up as we go along.
Okay. That's totally cool.
There's actually a group on Facebook that looks for random podcasters who just talk about everything. I don't have my phone on me to look it up and tell you, but Facebook.
Yeah, just look in the category of podcasts, and and then usually I tell people to go in the category of groups, and there's hundreds and hundreds of different. Promote your podcast here, drop your podcast here, just be careful, because you will get emails from scammers.
Yeah.
But you also might get some listeners out of it, or you might get somebody, hey, I like what you're doing, come on my show or something. And there's even groups out there on Facebook, guest on a podcast, and you could guest, if it's a topic that you're into, and that way you can promote your show and everything.
So what is your show about?
It's called Promote Myself, right?
Yes, very good. Very good.
Yeah, so get in my proper position, dorky and desperate, your place for all things fantasy and sci-fi. That's kind of like the tagline for it.
Okay.
And everything. We just talking to a mic. We barely have any followers. We've got like 12 to 15 on there.
Yeah, that's good.
That's
That's
good.
awesome.
That's
Like
two digits.
That's
Yeah.
2 digits. Congratulations.
Yeah,
Thank
big
you.
word is
Doing awesome.
Now you have
That's more than your mom and dad.
I
Yeah.
coming in the back.
I
See?
just subbed. You're good.
16 right there.
Yeah.
That's a
As a matter of
fabulous
fact,
title, by the way.
There's a Facebook group I'm a part of where we're all content creators called Geeks United. You would be perfect for that. That's where you should go to promote your podcast. We all support each other. We all collab on each other's podcasts. We all listen to each other's podcasts just because we're all dorks and geeks and blurs ourselves, and we just want to have arguments to see who's the king of the nerds.
Right, yeah. That's essentially what we do, yeah.
Because
What?
it wouldn't be the internet without argument.
And you've just defined your target market.
Yep.
Okay, explain that to me.
So like you're looking for somebody who's into fantasy and science fiction, but not just in a read a book every now and then. You're talking to people who this is a part of their life. This is a
Yeah.
part of their lifestyle. That they're okay with defining themselves as being dorky or geeky or nerdy.
Yeah.
They're probably between the ages of, let's say, 20 to 55, 60, but probably a lot of them, since you're a younger man,
Yeah,
I'm
thank
assuming,
you.
you might not be, but who knows? Somewhere
I'm
between that.
37, so I'll let you take
Okay.
what you will with that.
But we're good, 25 to 45. You can decide if you swing one way on one of the gender or float in the middle, it doesn't matter. But you're getting an idea of what that person looks like, and they probably look a lot like you.
Mm.
So when you think about your target market, it can be that way. You can also be surprised. When I first started Geek Meet Social, I thought I would have a very geeky audience of cross-gender and everything. I ended up with a lot of female subscribers who are very interested in the fact that I like geek stuff, but I'm also an organizer and planner and talk about, what was it you first said here?
Uh-oh.
Imposter syndrome.
Yes.
That's it. And so, yeah, I was surprised at what my audience turned out to be. So you may find that as well, but you're there. And what was the Facebook group? Because I didn't get it written down.
Geeks United.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, on Facebook. Yeah, I wrote that down.
And your podcast was?
Dorky and Desperate.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna look for you. You already got another one right.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. I'm gonna tell my friend Travis that we got 2 followers.
All because you shook your tail feathers.
That's
Yeah,
right.
That's right.
My fail feathers.
Your fail tethers, yes.
And as
You're
a,
not failing, though.
No.
as a friend of mine said, if you have 15 followers and you gain 3 today, you've got 20% increase.
Hey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Percentage is always better.
Did you see another hand out here earlier? No? Yes, no?
No one wants to talk to us.
Okay.
They want to listen to you. They don't want to talk to you.
Don't you guys do podcasts? That's how it works.
Right.
Come on.
All right, so we've actually covered a lot of ground here with networking and promotion and the business of podcasting. What about topics, evergreen content, keeping it fresh? How do we do that?
I'm so happy you mentioned Evergreen. So, small backstory. In the day, I'm a black geek and I do all my fun stuff. And at night, I work at a TV station where we have to have evergreens. That's a TV term. Evergreen is something that you make that you can just put out at any time. A problem that I have had as a podcaster and content creator is staying relevant. That's always like a huge thing. Like since I cover like geeky things in pop culture, if a Marvel movie comes out on Thursday, I have until Monday at the latest to post something about it, or else I fall out of relevancy. So I don't like that because that's a quick turnaround for me. I don't like doing that. I like to talk about things that I can just prolong throughout. So I do like an interview series that was my evergreens. I would find cosplayers or comic book artists or comic writers or whoever in the geek sphere and interview them. That actually turned into the main focus of my podcast because I did so many of them, trying to stay away from relevant topics that I have only 2 or 3 hours to post on to get the best results for SEO and things like that. So that's kind of how I accidentally fell into what my niche is for my podcast.
Well, for me, it's always, trying to see what's coming out, because First Station One is a total geek podcast, and, each week we talk about something different, and we're scheduled out. I make a schedule that's at least 6 months in advance, and, every once in a while we have to scrap an idea because of something important, a news story breaks, or something really hot that we weren't expecting is more relevant to talk about than what we had. But we talk about, movies, TV, music, we do interviews, we look at comic artists, comic writers, we look at it all, and we even had to cut back a little bit because we also used to do a science episode. We also used to do an episode about, we used to do LGBT. We also, we did all across the spectrum, and we also were looking at, how do we said, do we want to mainstream it, let's talk about like just TV or movie? It's like, no, we like talking about everything. That's why our station is your station for all things geek. And that's why we also have 26 different shows on our network to be able to talk about all different topics and everything. And that's where you have to see where you fit in. guys enjoy.
So I boxed myself into a corner when I decided that my show was going to be really all about like the news of the last week. So I don't have that much evergreen content, but I do have an answer for this question. So so stick with me. Every once in a while, I will do something that is a little bit more evergreen. And so like I do a video game podcast, but I very recently got into, I got some arcade one-up cabinets. Have you ever tried to build one of those?
Yes.
Well, so I've got those, and also I've like gotten into pinball collecting. I've been fortunate enough to be able to get into that. Have you ever put together a pinball machine?
No.
Probably not. But I went through that on my podcast, and since it is an audio podcast, and I am very good at doing the descriptive audio, but we're on Twitch, and we have the video, and I shot video of me doing this that I was narrating over, and that content I put on other platforms. So that portion of my podcast is on YouTube. And it's got all the SEO of YouTube, but in the comments, it's like, this was part of episode 754 of the Bobby Blackwell Show. You can find it here. But that way, people are seeing that portion, and if they like the way that it's presented, maybe they'll check out the podcast. So my evergreen content is what goes to other platforms, whereas the weekly, news and, stuff would be on the Twitch feed as well as the podcast feed.
That's a great idea.
That's a really good idea.
And if I do interviews, I also do that the same way, because what we do to make money is when you're a Twitch affiliate, you can lock your VODs to subscribers only, which can also mean somebody who used their Twitch Prime for the Prime Gaming sub, but they pay $5 a month, then they can see the VODs. But if you're not a subscriber, you can't see the video. So the stuff I really want them to see that's evergreen, they can see for free on YouTube.
Cool.
So one thing you can do, the Geeky site originally was a very much current topic thing, and I've turned it into an interview show, which makes it definitely more evergreen. But like with Mike's shows, where they're covering current topics, they don't watch his show if you don't want to be spoiled. But the great thing you can do with his stuff, even though it's very relevant, is let's say the next season is getting ready to start, he can promo that old episode where they reviewed the season before, or the movie sequel's coming back. We'll say, hey, did you miss our episode the first time? Go back and watch it before you see the new series. So even in something that seems very current event driven, you can turn it into evergreen by just remembering, hey, okay, we talked about James Bond. We've got all this James Bond content. Here comes a new movie. Hey, guess what? Check out blah, 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 blah.
It's okay to reference older material.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we just tell them, we'll wait till you come back. We won't be going anywhere.
How much do you chase trends to keep up with an audience and keep your content engaging?
I stopped chasing trends. Well, no, let me not say that. I try not to chase the trends. I focus on things that I just naturally want to talk about on my podcast. Like I said, I do interviews and things like that, but for other episodes when I'm not doing interviews, it has to be something that I am passionate about, something that I am interested in, because trends are trends, they're going to come and go. But for me, I care more about the authenticity of how I would come off of the subject matter that I want to talk about. I talk about football on my geeky podcast because I'm a huge Falcons fan. I grew up in Atlanta, and I feel like you can still be considered a nerd by liking sports, because I do fantasy football and stuff too, and that's super geeky.
Fantasy football is just D&D for jocks.
It does not have to be a jock. I'm on an all-female fantasy football league. So there.
I think that makes you a jock.
You are.
That's actually what it is.
I married a high school football player, so it's okay. I've watched a lot of ESPN.
Trends come and go, and and that's basically with our podcast, we don't follow the trends. We talk about things we like, and that's where I think most of us stand out by doing what we like, what we have a passion for. And we even made a t-shirt that says geek equals passion, and it's what you're passionate about. I don't care what's going to be hot this week. We're looking at the trends and everything, because in 2 weeks that podcast episode will be outdated, and I want people to go back and listen to older shows. I have 645 episodes, to listen to. I want people to go back. I wouldn't say number one, but I want them to go back to listen and hear, what we're talking about.
I think people can catch you if you're trying to catch a trend. It's not very authentic. And when you're podcasting, it's you doing the talking. So if you're catching a trend and you're not being who you are authentically, your audience is going to know that. I mean,
Okay, so I have kind of a niche question that you actually just reminded me of. So our podcast has been going on for a little under 4 years.
Okay.
And so we do actually have quite a number of episodes, but unfortunately, the two gentlemen who actually started the podcast from the very beginning, one of them is still on it, but there have been others who have taken over the podcast with him, and I'm one of those two people. And we jumped on somewhere in the neighborhood of episode 25 to 30.
Okay.
So what do you do in some ways, or are there any thoughts that you guys have about sort of seamlessly, if you will, making it so that you're not necessarily sending them back to the very beginning of the show if the show isn't what it was at the very beginning anymore, if that makes sense.
I mean,
If you're on episode 150 and you want to send them back to like episode 35 because that's really the same as episode 150, like with the same people and the same feel, how do you do that? How do you navigate like a show that's a little bit different than what it started as?
Well, you just give them a little bit of a caveat and say, hey, we talked about, say, Clone Wars in episode 35 of Earth Station 1, and you'll be able to hear, this is the first episode, say, with Mike Gordon as a co-host. And, it might sound a little bit different, but, the information is still very pertinent. And, and it's kind of cool, in the archives. You could also say, you could hear my voice is a little higher, or you could hear, you just make fun of it and have fun with it. And because you do want to promote your older episodes too, and make them very easy to access. The search bar on your website is one of the best ways, because a lot of times if they go to Google or Apple, they only have the last 50 episodes up there. So people want to hear older stuff, and like between Bobby and I, there's 1,500 episodes, and that's a lot of content to go through.
Yeah, and also what you can do is, because people like to see the evolution.
Yeah.
Like if they like it now, they want to hear what it was like with the original person. My favorite band Rush had a different drummer for the first album. People like going back to hearing John Rutsey. But what you can put also, because podcasting, especially, we've been doing it for a long time. We also put on disclaimers being like, by the way, 2005 was a little bit of a different time in terms of what was said. So, just keep that in mind, that there are things we wouldn't say in 2022 that we would at that time.
Also, technology is different.
Yeah.
And so, it sounds different, it is different, and it's a whole different world we're living in, when we started the podcast, there wasn't even an iPhone, type thing. So it's pretty amazing what you can do, and it's just...
Back when everybody thought podcast was because it was on an iPod.
Exactly. Well, exactly. And, I remember sitting at my tables at conventions, people walking, what's a podcast? And, it's like a talk show. Oh, like Rush Limbaugh. Okay.
TiVo for radio. That's what I would say. And everybody here's like, what's TiVo?
So I'm actually struggling with this.
Okay.
Because the geeky side used to be me and a partner co-host doing it. It's now just me. The format's completely changed, but I love the IP of the property, so I didn't want to get rid of it.
Oh, of course.
And so I'm having that debate. What do I do with the old episodes? And right now, I don't have as many as you do, but I'm thinking of stripping them off and sending them to archive.org and referencing them on the site that way.
That's a good way to do it.
Or say that's version 1.0 and this is version
Yeah,
1.0.
so, no, it's definitely, I'm version 2.0 always. So that's what I'm thinking about doing. What you haven't told us is, what is your podcast?
So myself and two other gentlemen do the Black Tower podcast, which is actually entirely a Wheel of Time podcast.
Right on.
Awesome.
Yeah, and so we just talk about different topics, and we're a full spoiler podcast. There are a lot out there who are doing sort of reading through the series. We have fully read the series, and we just talked about things sort of start to finish, because Robert Jordan especially and Brandon Sanderson are amazing at going ahead and doing things from book one that actually have relevance in book 11.
Yeah.
And so actually being able to talk about sort of these themes all the way across the series is very fun. And so we really dive deep into those different things just all throughout the Wheel of Time.
Have you been talking about the TV series?
We have, yes.
Cool.
And that's another way that I appreciate it. Sort of, we do a lot of evergreen stuff. We almost all of our stuff is evergreen because most of it is about the book series, which has been out for a while. And so it's not, immediately relevant because there aren't a whole lot of Wheel of Time books coming out anymore. But the television show and the new Origins book and things like that, we're definitely getting a lot more sort of immediately relevant things because of those new properties that are coming out, which is really
That's
cool.
awesome.
Yeah.
So we got about 10 minutes left. And what I want to do at this point, we'll get your question here in a second, but I also want to open the floor because this is all about shaking your tail feathers. We've been doing this, we've got a couple people here. So what are you working on? You're all podcasters, right? You've got a show. Let's talk about it. What is your show about? We'll start here with your question. Yeah.
Actually, I need a little ammunition for my show. I'm on Cyberpunk or Cyber Psychos. It's a cyberpunk red tabletop live play game. It's me, a handful of stand-up comedians from Charleston area, and a few other folks. Really good production value. The DM's great, but I didn't realize how much I just kind of incepted myself into it, where I play kind of a jackass YouTuber in the cyberpunk world. And what are some, I need some ideas of cringy ways to, market myself, because in the middle of a firefight, I need to be able to pull up my little selfie cam, and it's like, you're on Brockdown, and, telling people to like and subscribe, and just, what are ways to market that maybe more funny than effective?
Well, since you're live, you do it on camera, right?
No. I'm actually thinking about just to market the podcast, start my own little TikTok channel and start doing those as well. But I'm more thinking like in story. What's probably the worst, examples of self-promotion that you've seen?
Just go to a car dealership
Yeah.
and you'll be good. But I think you're onto something with the TikTok or short reels because you can utilize them in so many places. On Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and on TikTok. Strip off the TikTok stuff before you take them other places, please, for the love of God.
Yeah.
But I think that doing that kind of coming up next with your big sign, and I think you could have a brand time with it on those. And you don't even have to do them very long.
Yeah. Coming up next, this guy's gonna battle axe to the head.
Yes. You just need a folding chair and the ability to lift it.
Can you get someone else to act like they're TikToking and then you photobomb them and promote your podcast on their TikTok?
That's really good.
That would be
Yeah,
awesome.
I can make that happen.
You're a professional, aren't you?
Also, t-shirts.
Like and subscribe.
That's
Yeah.
t-shirts. T-shirts,
right.
key
Yeah.
tags, postcards, anything.
Yeah, we're definitely on the verge of starting to work on merch.
Because you can start a TeePublic store for free,
Yeah.
and all you have to do is upload your artwork or whatever, your logo or stuff like, or just you can even make up like different sayings. Hey, I'm a big jerk, or or something like that, and put it on a T-shirt, and have your podcast promoted on it, and it's pretty darn awesome.
There's a lot of RPG podcasts here. You might want to
Talk to
talk to
someone.
them.
Oh yeah.
And you could
I was
break,
at one yesterday.
and you could break in on theirs. Like all of a sudden there's elves and then there's you. And I think there's a lot of collabs you could do that'd be really fun.
There's so many ways to check.
Speaking of which, can I actually ask a relevant question right now, just real quick?
Yeah.
What do you guys use, sites-wise, for your merch? Because I actually think that's a super helpful thing for younger podcasts to just not just go with what Google thinks you should go with as far as merch, actual people who have used merch stores. What do you guys use? And
What I love about TeePublic is you could just put your artwork up there, and they will have down the side all the different merchandise that you could put your logo on.
Okay.
You could put it on banners, you could put it on coffee mugs, you could put it on mouse pads, you could have, whatever you want. You don't have to choose what you want your merch on.
Sure.
Just put your logo up and they'll have it there for you, which it makes it so much more easy. I saw people yesterday wearing Dragon Con reporting t-shirts, or I saw people on Thursday night, someone had a koozie with Earth Station 1 on it, you know, and Marion, I said, that's my podcast, and they're like, yeah, get away from me.
How's the quality of the material on like the
T-shirts are
shirts?
awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, they're
It's
they're
very
really
solid.
good quality.
So really,
Yeah.
And they wash well.
Is that TEE public or
T-Public,
T?
like t-shirt.
T-shirt, okay, cool.
tpublic.com.
Right now.
Yeah, and it's awesome for you to do it.
Yeah.
And, you know, they don't even have to buy your stuff if they use your link and they go look at other designers or something. You still get money when they buy stuff
Oh, wow.
and everything because they went through your link.
Nice.
Which makes it even cooler.
So what we used for a little bit was Streamlabs.
Okay.
Because we're Twitch streamers, and it also integrated with all the integrations and stuff. So when somebody bought merch, we got an alert that got sent up and stuff. But unfortunately, you needed to pay up front for that, and also when Streamlabs and OBS had their little spat, we're like, we like our open source friends, and so I know there's no ethical consumption in capitalism, but we decided that we were going to go somewhere else. We were looking into Stream Elements because they also have a merch store. And it ties in with their alerts, which is what we use now is Stream Elements alerts.
Nice.
And the cool thing like with T-Public, and I'm not a shill for them at all. They have sales and stuff like that
Nice.
with it. And so like at least twice a month where you could actually help, you know, say, hey, we've got our t-shirts on sale for $14, you know, and you could get it up there, and a lot of times it's free shipping. Or if you buy, you know, other things, it's 35% off. So you just go through and, you know, it's a way to get your name out there. And the coolest thing is going to Dragon Con or going to any con or walking at the mall, anything, and seeing somebody wearing your shirt.
Yep.
The weirdest one was we created a logo with our faces on it and everything. See somebody having my face on their chest.
Yep.
It's pretty awesome.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
All right, so now back here, you have your 30-second elevator pitch on your podcast? Or you got a question?
I don't have a podcast, I actually have a YouTube channel.
Okay,
that's okay.
Go for it.
We are the Artist Haven. We are a haven for creators of all walks of life and media formats. On your merch, this is my merch.
Yeah.
I get it from Spreadshirt.
Okay.
And Spreadshirt, Spreadshop, depending on who you are. It's also can be integrated on the YouTube channel.
We use Spreadshirt currently.
Yep.
So yeah.
So you can integrate that. Stream Elements, I think they're working with them to get a kind of alert for that, because I use Stream Elements as well.
Yeah.
Because right now, for the last year, we've only been doing live streams.
Nice.
And I was gonna ask you, because we do the Twitch, which I tried to do and failed miserably, and I just said, okay, forget it, we're not gonna even try anymore. Did you do your Twitch streams and then go into podcasting?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, no. I was a podcaster first.
Okay.
And I started with live streams, but it was audio, so it was over Shoutcast, internet radio.
Okay.
So like you could find us on the TuneIn app. That was how a lot of people later on found us. And then we were like, well, nobody listens to internet radio anymore.
Right.
And so that's when we jumped to Twitch. But we didn't go to Twitch until like 2018, so that was like year 14 of my podcast.
Well, we've been going live since 2019.
Okay.
Cool.
So 3 years, and I was doing it 7 days a week for a while.
Oh, wow.
Oh, Lord.
And
You're worse than I am.
now we're going to 2 days a week. We've kind of slowly taken days off.
Yeah.
But I'm also integrating more edited content into the channel as well. Because I know that's the way to get more people to see our live streams, is by putting edited content that'll appeal to more people.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing. So, but I just wanted to know if you have a recommendation for someone who's kind of maybe reverse engineering that. Like, because I've been live streaming on YouTube. I started on Facebook too, but I want to take some of the content that I already have and start a podcast with it, and then start adding more and more and more stuff in just a podcast. How would you recommend kind of doing
We got 2 minutes.
I think there's probably a panel coming up next that would also help on that.
Yes.
Yes.
The next panel is actually about podcast, like,
Switching.
it's
Yeah,
going the other
switching.
direction.
Yeah.
But there's a little bit about, we'll talk about how to not alienate the audio-only listeners with your video content and, stuff like that. So maybe stick around, because I only have 2 minutes.
Literally, in 30 minutes, we'll be talking about
Yeah.
in this
Well, I
room.
didn't-
Or come and chat with us in a second at one time.
Yeah.
Definitely.
What
I apologize for not getting to everybody who wanted to shake the tail feathers out there, but we are pretty much out of time. So I want to go down the list one more time so we can all shake our tail feathers.
Yeah.
And thank everybody for being here today.
Shaking our field.
So let's start with Tyra.
I'll start again. So I am Tyra Burton. I'm at tyraburton.com and thegeekyside.com and geekmeetsocial.com, because if there's a URL and I have a show on it, I buy it. You should too. That's my thing. So drop in, listen. I need more listeners too. So
And I'm Bobby Blackwolf. I'm the host of the Bobby Blackwolf Show. I'm at Bobby Blackwolf on Twitter, at VOG Network, the Voice of Geeks Network. That is the network on Twitter, vognetwork.com. I also own vog.network. And because somebody else would always say thevognetwork.com, I had to buy that URL too.
yes.
And so that is where I'm at, and I do my show live every Sunday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific for 1 hour over at the VOG Network Twitch channel, and then it's put out on the podcast feed.
Awesome. My name is Mike Faber. You can find me, of course, anywhere across social media, Mike Faber, and of course, the ESO Network, esonetwork.com, and then First Station One, which is firststation1.com. And, we're always looking for new podcasters for our network, so if anyone has a geek show that they're looking to expand, please talk to me.
I am Mark Leary. You can find me on YouTube under Blurredography. That's Blurred and Photography, Blurredography. And you can also find me on everywhere you can listen to an audio podcast at Blurredcast. I talk about blurred culture and a lot of geeky things, so come check me out.
You did amazing for your first panel.
Yay.
I am Michael Clark. You can find me at creativecriticality.net. There are business cards because that title is a little hard to spell. I also have ribbons up here. And thank you so much for coming out.
Faulkner's not that hard to spell.
No, it's not. Well, actually, you'd be amazed.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for coming out to shake your tail feathers. Appreciate you
Thank you, guys.
Just shake it. That's all.